Okay. Could everyone see my
Yes.
main screen?
Hmm.
Good. Okay. So as what Dr. Oleksienko mentioned, my name is Roy Y. Chan. I'm an assistant professor of education, and I also direct our Doctor of Education program. And today, I'm very thrilled to talk about my book that was recently came out in October 2023 on rethinking hybrid and remote work in higher education. I put the URL in the chat for those who would like to browse around some of the selected table of contents or some of the chapters that are included in the 16 chapter volume book. A little bit background about this book. This book was actually a 2-year project that me, my colleagues, Dr. Shi Lin, as well as Dr. Krishnan Vista, collaborated together to understand how does the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically, how does the shift of distance and remote work may impact some of the academic services, programs, policies, and procedures in global higher education. Um, when we were thinking about ideas, drafting the book project through Palgrave Macmillan, which is an affiliate with Springer, we talked about and identified it two particular key areas that we wanted to kind of develop over the next couple of years after when the COVID-19 pandemic occurred. And the two themes that we came up was one, online teaching and learning, which is a significant shift because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And two, we wanted to focus on how does hybrid and remote work may impact employees in terms of engagement, experiences, satisfaction in global higher education. So that's how the book came up to be over the past 2 years, just working to understand the trends, issues, policies, and experiences of hybrid and remote work in global higher education. So this is just an outline of my presentation. My presentation is just going to be about 20 to 25 minutes. It's not going to be a long presentation. This is just more of an opportunity to provide you with some key recommendations and resources for faculty members and staff members who are interested or perhaps considering adopting new policies and procedures of hybrid or remote work in higher education. So a little bit of context, as I mentioned earlier, because the COVID-19 pandemic occurred in March 2020, it has significantly accelerated the rise of hybrid and remote work in higher education worldwide. This is not necessarily a United States phenomenon. Hybrid and remote work has also been begin to become more recognized it as some sort of what we call as a new normal, particularly in European countries as well as Australia and New Zealand. So when we think about hybrid and remote work, we begin to recognize that this is sort of now going to become the new normal. That institutions will begin to adopt and sort of mimic other institutions to perhaps consider creating new policies and guidelines of what remote and hybrid work should look like in higher education institutions. Over the past year, since the post-pandemic, of course, in 2023, we have seen a significant rise of higher education institutions that are now offering fully remote positions as well as hybrid positions. But when we talk about fully remote positions, that is 100% online or from a distance. And from a recent report from the CUPA HR, they've recognized that there was almost a 200% increase in the United States in the post-pandemic, where higher education institutions are now offering fully remote positions from a distance. Compared to the pre-pandemic, many colleges and universities never offer any fully remote positions, particularly for faculty and staff members. This is just a recent snapshot I wanted to pull up yesterday. I wanted to go, not go, but I wanted to go to Chronicle. I went to Chronicle of Higher Education and I typed in the keywords remote. And what came back from the results from yesterday was there's now about 2,829 fully remote positions in the United States. Most of these positions are in the US. There's sort of a split of 50-50 between faculty positions and administrative positions. But with that said, we can somewhat argue that this has actually become more of a recent trend that many US institutions are recognizing that fully remote positions may be something that should be considered for institutions. Similar to Chronicle of Higher Education, I've also did a search on higher ed jobs yesterday. And from that search, it yielded to roughly about 500 or so online or fully online remote positions across the United States and around the world. When we think about fully remote positions, this is a survey that was recently released last month by the Chronicle of Higher Education. And when we think about specific positions, when we look at academic affairs or student affairs, majority of institutions of higher education are offering hybrid work, specifically in IT, human resources, and academic administration. When we take the whole hybrid work percentage, looking from IT to dining services, you can see that majority of the positions from libraries to IT, more than 50% of those are now beginning to offer flexible work arrangements where individuals can either have a choice of choosing whether to be in person or to do and perform their responsibilities from a distance. But with that said, as you notice, IT, HR, and academic administration are now typically offered in hybrid work, as well as faculty members who are, of course, now mostly teaching from a distance during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. So a little bit about definition. I think it's important to think about how do we define hybrid work. Of course, everyone has different sort of definitions, particularly in the field of business administration, management, and leadership studies. But in this book, I define it as a combination of both in-person and remote elements. And that typically means that faculty and staff can choose 2 or more locations, depending on their job requirements, to perform whatever they are required to do for their job duties. When we think about remote work, it is it tends to be 100% fully from a distance, where an individual or an employee performs their duties such as teaching a course or perhaps running a meeting or perhaps conducting a academic advising meeting from a distance or from a virtual distance. Usually this person will be performing their duties from 100% remote, allowing the employer to have significant amount of flexibility and accessibility to perform their duties outside the institutions. So one thing that we wanted to highlight in the book is why you or perhaps your institution should recruit hybrid or remote employees in higher ed. One of the key thing that we mentioned in chapter 1 is that it allows institutions to hire renowned faculty members and staff members from elite institutions. So what that means is that because we have become more of a hybrid, remote-centric era, institutions of higher education have now the ability to recruit famous professors, highly talented staff members such as VPs, presidents, director of global affairs or study abroad from a distance from any institution and offer those positions from a distance. Another reason is that institutions can also reduce office space on campus. And I think that's a really good, significant benefit, especially for institutions who are strapped in cash. This allows an institution to what I call as, cost benefit analysis. They save money significantly by reducing their office space and hiring employees from a distance. So any institutions in higher education around the world can actually hire remote or hybrid employees and not even have an office space for these faculty or staff members. It improves diversity of talent and skills in terms of experiences, in terms of identities and intersectionalities, their values and dispositions that may enhance the diversity of the institution. It allows higher education to accommodate various schedules and preferences of faculty members. So now with hybrid and remote work, faculty and staff members can work with their employees to accommodate all sorts of schedules and preferences of these individuals. And lastly, it also allows more international academic programs and services from a distance. So if I was at the University of Hong Kong and I was working at HR, I could actually facilitate a conversation with a faculty member to perhaps create a joint or dual degree program or some sort of international academic program from a distance, and not having the faculty member be on campus to enhance the internationalization of the institution itself. So in other words, there are many reasons why you at your institution can consider the opportunity to recruit hybrid and remote employees. This is just a graph of why I believe it's important for us to think about hybrid working. As mentioned a little bit, is that one, it reduces costs and environmental impacts. So of course, with the reduction of office spaces, with the reduction of number of employees commuting to the campus, it helps the employees reduce their costs to actually work at that particular institution. Second, there is significant and growing research that hybrid employees are just as productive and effective as in-person employees in higher education. And there has been many research studies in the business administration, management, and leadership studies that have shown that in the for-profit sector, many organizations are able to have hybrid and remote employees and still be able to maintain and sustain their productivity and performances within the organization itself. It allows to attract and retain talent, as I mentioned earlier, as well as enhance work-life balance and well-being. And I really believe that's actually really important, where many employees now want to have a work-life balance, not just a typical 8 to 5 office job where they have to stress about, meeting deadlines and they can't do anything unless it's in the office. Many institutions of higher education are beginning to recognize that employees want work-life balance. They want to have a life outside their work responsibility. And that could be personal time with family. It could be traveling. It could be opportunities to spend time with the children, such as their son and daughter, and focus on their health and mental well-being in terms of stress, anxiety, coping with perhaps any depression or any other issues that an employee may experience in higher education. So a little about the literature review. One thing that we've emphasized in this book is that hybrid and remote work is an understudied phenomenon in the field of higher education. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, there actually has been no study that has ever studied hybrid and remote work in higher ed. And that's largely because we don't think about that as an option before the pandemic started it. And now, when the post-pandemic, everyone is beginning to recognize, so what does that actually should look like? How can institutions of higher education use this as an opportunity to enhance the productivity and effectiveness of the institution? So this study is part of a larger work to hopefully begin a conversation of what hybrid and remote work can look like in the field of higher education. And when we think about past study, of course, most studies have mostly looked at hybrid learning, online teaching and learning, but very few people have looked at the employee aspects or employees working in higher education, how that actually affects the institution's capacity. A couple of articles that I found more recently is that there was a recent survey that found that more than 75% of those working in hybrid setting did not want to go back to fully in-person work environment. So what that means is that many employees, whether you're in academic affairs, student affairs, or just a general administrator, many employees wanted to actually stay in a hybrid setting compared to going back to a fully 8 to 5 job in person. And the survey also found that nearly 66% of academic and administrative leaders said their campuses were working on a hybrid basis, which is great because institutions are now starting to recognize that this may be the new model or this new trend that institutions should consider adopting within their own institution. And the last point is that 93%, most administrators and faculty members agree that hybrid setup benefits morale, with some suggesting that they would seek employment elsewhere without it. And I think that's a true statement, because of the rise of faculty burnout and fatigue among staff members. Both faculty and staff are beginning to recognize that if you're not offering hybrid work, I don't want to work there. I want to go somewhere else that actually has a hybrid option or some sort of flexible work arrangement if he or she wants to work at that institution. There has been several studies, particularly in the business administrative side, that has shown that hybrid work can bring many reward and benefits to an institutional culture, as well as enhance the quality of life for workers when we're thinking about satisfaction, experiences, belonging, as well as even retention and engagement of the institution. There has been many positive aspects of offering hybrid work at the institutional level. And organizations, as I mentioned earlier, can reduce significant cost as well as improve work-life balance, engagement, and improve employee retention. And that's already mentioned earlier, but these are some of the articles that have recently highlighted this once again, that there are many benefits to hybrid work. There are several challenges to hybrid work. So I want to mention, yes, there are many rewards and positives of hybrid work, but there are several challenges that HR professionals, as well as faculty and staff members, should consider. So one of them is equitable compensation for remote and hybrid work. That can always be a big question. Should employees be paid the same amount for those who are working fully remote compared to those who are working fully in person? And of course, it's one of the big challenges in the business side is that it's much more harder to develop fair pay from a distance, especially in developing and transitional countries where academic corruption and mismanagement are pretty evident, and we know that significantly that does exist in higher education. So managing fair pay as well as equitable compensation is definitely a big challenge. The second is compliance with employment laws. There are several laws that each central government may want to adopt and implement, and following these procedures and guidelines can be a challenge for institutions of higher education who seek to offer hybrid or remote work. Guidelines, procedures, and policies. Of course, it's hard to manage expectations for work hours and communications, as well as ICT. We know that some institutions in marginalized communities may not have access to, prestigious or first-class technology at their own institution. In terms of a recent survey by the Chronicle of Higher Education, the number one the number one biggest challenge with hybrid workforce is connecting with peers in terms of fostering community, fostering sense of belonging, or what my colleague Terrell Strayhorn would like to say, workplace belonging. It's very challenging. It's very difficult for many institutions to offer more opportunities to connect with their peers if they are working from a distance or doing hybrid work on campus. So in summary, these are some of the advantages and disadvantages from the literature review in terms of both hybrid and remote work. I'm not going to read this to you, but all of this is sort of already alluded in my previous slides in terms of accommodation of various schedules, personalized life experiences. So there are many advantages with hybrid and remote work, but there's also many disadvantages in terms of offering hybrid and remote work in higher education, as what those are listed in this particular slide. So I'm gonna save this part for questions and just move on to some recommendations that you guys can actually use as scholars, as practitioners, as well as policymakers in higher education, because I also want it to be beneficial for those who are actually planning to maybe implement hybrid or remote policies or procedures on campus. So my first recommendation that I outlined in the book, particularly in chapter 1, is I really believe that institutions of higher education should think about innovative ways to develop policies and procedures for hybrid and remote work. Obviously, there's no one size fit all, but I think one way practitioners can do is maybe look at other institutions who have already adopted hybrid and remote work policy. So for example, Howard University in Washington, D.C. has already adopted permanent telework policy for all faculty and staff members at the institutions. And it allows the institution to offer more flexible work schedule for faculty and staff members. In addition to the United States, I wanted to show an example outside the United States. So one example is the King's College in London in the United Kingdom. They have an entire page fully fleshed out about how to create hybrid and remote work policy. And there's several documents that are listed that I think were very beneficial for perhaps practitioners to look at if they want to implement hybrid and remote work policy. So in other words, it's not just a US trend, it's also happening in Europe, where they are also beginning to adopt hybrid and remote work policy on their website. My second recommendation is offer flexible work schedules and reduce work hours to employees. I really believe in creativity and innovation, where faculty and staff members have the opportunity to work in a flexible work schedule and still be as productive as being in person. An example is at Montclair State University, where they allow employees to request one or more of the following. Employees can choose a compressed schedule, flex time schedule, or a hybrid schedule for both faculty and staff members. And Montclair State University really believed that the traditional 40, 50, 60-hour work week is not actually sustainable for their employees, especially for women who may have other childcare responsibilities. Other institutions that have also provided workplace flexibility a good example is the University of Iowa. They have a good relationship with China. And I wanted to show that they have an full fleshed out page of why they believe workplace flexibility is so important for their employees. So the university is a big advocate for their administrators to choose whether they want to do hybrid or fully remote work. And I think that this website can be a great example for practitioners to maybe consider if they want to adopt it at their own institution. Outside the United States, there's one in Australia, Monash University. They have a full out page of why they believe flexing or hybrid work is important for their supervisors and staff. And they've outlined their vision and their strategic plan and why it's actually important to offer this flexible work environment. So again, it's not a US trend, it's also happening outside the United States. The third recommendation that I do, I would like to encourage practitioners to encourage open communication and workplace belonging. We do know that sometimes when you work from a distance, it can be challenging to foster an open dialogue and an open communication, especially for employees who may be setting their own expectations and their own job requirements. So encouraging open communication and feedback to identify and address certain issues between constituencies. It's really important in order to offer successful hybrid and workplace environment. Terrell Strayhorn, who is a big advocate of sense of belonging, has begun to create a new terminology of what he defines as workplace belonging, that it's not just the students who needs to be belong on campus, but it's also the faculty and staff. Both faculty and staff has to feel belong in order to, for institutions of higher education to perform successful duties in their campus environment. This is a conceptual framework that he developed earlier this summer of what workplace belonging looks like. And what he articulates is that you matter. You know, every employee matters, whether you're a professor, whether you're an executive assistant to the president, or if you're or if you're just working in financial aid or admissions, you matter. And part of Terrell Strayhorn argument is that employees have to foster belonging in order to retain and engage employees over the course of period of time if you're working from a distance. So he outlined these 5 particular areas: such as self-actualization, esteem needs, belonging needs, safety needs, as well as psychological needs. And these are all needs that employees need in order to do and perform their job successfully from a distance, if you're seeking to enhance workplace belonging for your employees. And lastly, it's really important, since this is a new phenomenon in higher education, it's so important for employees to promote professional development and support hybrid remote work. And that could encompass of certain training, workshops, courses that HR or even your staff members can offer to connect new employees to how to perform remote and hybrid work from a distance. If training does exist at your institution, I always encourage practitioners to provide certain tools, resources that are needed to perform the job from a distance. And if it doesn't exist, it's important for you as an employee to provide some sort of orientation that can be used to onboard new employees with the necessary resources to be effective. So an example is the University of Michigan. The University of Michigan has an entire web page on their website of certain training, educational tools, resources that individuals can use to support hybrid workplace environment. So the University of Michigan has some workshops, where employees can click on certain links to learn how can they actually do their work from a hybrid work. And it's a great example to use if you're interested in creating a professional training website for hybrid workplace employees. Another example is NYU. NYU is a great institution. They're a wonderful model to look at in terms of their framework to support hybrid and remote work from a distance. And they have a great website and webpage that has certain recommendations that perhaps you can consider if you're looking to develop and adopt hybrid and remote work policies. So in short, this is my last slide. As I said, I wanted to keep it within 20 to 25 minutes. I really believe that both faculty and staff members around the world are now expecting that hybrid and remote work will be and should be part of their job description moving forward. And I believe that it's really here to stay, even in the post-pandemic. I don't see hybrid and work sort of diminishing. There's some arguments between scholars that hybrid work may disappear, but with the acceleration of artificial intelligence, such as specifically AI, ChatGPT, new innovations that are happening, I do expect hybrid work to be now the new normal, and that it's going to be part of the daily life of both faculty and staff members. So if your institution has not begun thinking about what that may look like in terms of hybrid and remote work, I do think that it is a good conversation to have, with your supervisor or with your HR office to see if this is something that maybe you should maybe create like a task force or a working committee to explore whether a hybrid work environment may be possible or feasible at your campus institution. I've already mentioned about the other four. Hybrid work can help institutions attract talent. So it allows you to attract international scholars, international students, international faculty members to work for your institution from a distance. And it helps, enhance the prestige of the institution if they have, world-class faculty members who are especially at aspiring world-class institutions that are trying to become world-class. This could be a good strategic opportunity for the institution to bring renowned faculty from a distance at research universities. It reduces costs, as I've already mentioned, improves productivity and performances, as well as enhance work-life balance and well-being. So in short, there are many benefits with hybrid and remote work. And this book was, a great overview of why you as a scholar, as a practitioner, as a policymaker, or just an administrator, to consider and explore how a hybrid work campus may look like at your institution. And I do encourage all of you guys to just take a look at the book and explore not just my chapter, but also the other 15 chapters that have talked about best practices, best procedures, best ways to enhance your academic services and programs from a distance, wherever you are, if you're interested in performing remote and hybrid work at your own institution. So this is my email address. Feel free to email me if you have any comments or questions. I'm gonna end my slideshow as well as stop sharing so we could have more of a conversation about and a dialogue about anything that you guys would like to talk about in terms of hybrid and remote work in higher education. So Anatoly.
Thank you so much, Roy. This has been a fascinating presentation, very timely, very important topic. Colleagues, I invite you to raise your hand and ask your question, or make a comment, or share maybe your experiences with Roy, or concerns if you have. And before you volunteer and raise your hand or type in your question or comment in the chat, I have a question that I would like to ask, which is related to agency. In terms of agency, in terms of who should start the whole process of liberalizing, let us say, the whole workplace, the whole environment, because I see it from the point of view of liberalization, right? So it's kind of, you have to move away from the traditional industrial model where people are at the places in a particular time doing particular kind of job, right, and achieving particular result, right? But now just with the change from industrial to information paradigm, so we can argue that work is not the same as job, or maybe work is not as the same as employment or labor. So there are these kind of there's this cluster emerging in terms of how we define work versus labor versus employment and many other issues. And conceptualization is really important here, because you have raised this important issue within this discourse, within which comes from practical things, right? It's because this discourse becomes really important in organizational theory and organizational studies. So, and from that point of view, agency is somebody who is taking responsibility, probably determination, who defines what should be done and how it should be done, where it should come from. I mean, you know, you have 15, you have many cases here in the book, and some of them come from global south, where, you know, in some countries there may be more traditional type of context and environment, right? So agency, I suppose, would be different. So how would you define this agency in terms of where we should begin with making a creating this kind of work-life balance and achieving this hybrid or remote work that benefits everyone?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we think about agency, I sometimes like to think about individuals who are involved in the conversation to foster hybrid and remote work policies and procedures, etc. And usually I think that it really starts from creating a task force, creates from your own institution. This, as I've mentioned earlier in my slides, hybrid and remote work is a new phenomenon. Many institutions of higher education do not have hybrid and remote work policies on their website. So I anticipate many institutions outside the United States, particularly in developing and transitional economies, have not even begun, having that conversation of what does a flexible work schedule or flexible work environment should look like on their respective campus. And because of that, I think it's important for employees at your own institutions to begin to see how can this actually be an added value to your own institution if this is something that you believe your institution should offer to your employees. And that can, of course, encompass through a task force, a working committee, a working group, or whatever at your own institution. But with regards to the agency, of course, there will be different viewpoints and perspectives, as well as dispositions of what hybrid and remote work should look like. There will be people who will be very against remote and hybrid work, and that's a fact, especially at maybe more centralized governments, maybe like China or other countries that do not think about that as an option. It may take a while for them to even think about that as an option. But I really believe that everything has to start with a conversation. It has to start with a dialogue. And I think this will be a ongoing conversation over the next decade, and about what a hybrid campus can look like for an institution, and how can that actually enhance internationalization efforts at your own institution. I really believe that hybrid and remote work is and should be part of a comprehensive internationalization process or strategy, or whatever you like to call it, because if you are able to flex, if you're able to offer that to the employees, I think it of course not one, increase satisfaction and happiness of employees, but two, it also allows you to reach out to any employees around the world who will fit best to enhance the effectiveness of your own institution. So with that said, agency, yes, it is a hot topic. It is something that should be considered and recognized. And I think it will take a while for other institutions to really think of, hybrid and remote work as an option. But I really believe it's just getting the conversation started is the most important part of the process.
Thank you. Yeah, I can see the hand from risen from Yem Bandhorn from Cambodia. Business school.
Yes. Thank you, Anatoly, for
Yeah.
the moderation. Hi, Dr. Roy. Thank you
Hi,
very much.
thank you.
First of all, congratulations to your successful publication of your book.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
uh, yeah, I'm from a school too, and uh, I can say that your topic is very interesting, and we also have a hybrid uh, class mode for a few courses. We also have professors teaching online from Singapore, from Malaysia, from some other countries, not but I can say most of classes are physical, but we do have some classes are delivered online.
Mm,
Uh, this is the, let's say, the benefit of online classes, hybrid mode, yeah. But still, my comment on the situation is this: I would say it may be depending on the nature of the job itself,
mhm,
whether it is designed to be let's say outcome based or maybe result based, and even employee based job.
mhm,
uh, in one aspect, hybrid 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 mode may be maybe not acceptable because it's beyond physical control. You may want to control something physically, but in some other aspect, maybe hybrid mode, online mode, maybe is the best option.
mhm.
Yeah, you may want to elaborate more, but this is just my bit of my
Yeah,
comment. Yeah. Uh,
definitely.
I also have one comment on the not a comment. I just want to see what your insight in this aspect,
Okay.
since this is the opportunity to take advantage of the online, let's
Mhm,
say, online environment, which is very powerful. We can
yeah.
outreach to people around the world. Let's say, let's talk about the education aspect, especially in developed countries, countries that are able to develop some sort of program, online program that can attract students around the world. But instead, we see most of the programs are what can I say? Are made available online, but all fee collecting program. We haven't seen any program that can absorb students based on their ability, disregarding students from anywhere around the world, uh, taking advantage of the environment of online or hybrid mode you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
If you have any insights about this, you may want to talk a little bit more.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah,
so much,
thank you so
Jem, for your
much.
question. I really appreciate your comment. So in regards to your first point, yes, it is very true that not all positions can be fully remote or even fully hybrid. So, for example, when we think about dining services, like the cafeteria, there is no way you could do a hybrid or fully remote work in the dining services or cafeteria building because you have to serve the food in person. Like you can't serve the food from a distance. So that's like an example of a position that can't be done fully online. And another example is like physical building, like building services. Campus facilities needs to be maintained in terms of grass needs to be cut, plants needs to be treated. Someone has to wash the windows of the classroom building, clean out the classroom, etc. Those positions, whoever are the facilities management, uh, that can't be done online and that cannot be done hybridly. You have to do that in person. So in other words, what I'm arguing is that not all positions need to be hybrid. Not all positions should be fully remote. However, there are some positions that can be done very successfully from a distance, or from a hybrid lens, and still be just as effective as being fully in person. So like, we all know traditional faculty members, faculty members tend to usually operate in hybrid positions. Sometimes they teach online, sometimes they teach in person, sometimes they offer, academic advising from a distance, or they do it in person. So even with those two kind of services, they are able to offer it in a very successful way, whether they're doing it hybridly or in person. So in short, it depends on the position. Not all positions should be hybrid, and not all positions should be fully remote. I want to have some time for Min to ask her question, because I know she's been raising her hand for quite some time.
Thank you very much. I'm from Myanmar. I'm just a PhD student at EDUHK. I also would like to share my experience when I start the new colleague from like minority groups, about how we design the class. It's like a Compass online class. It's like a student there in the Compass, but the scholars, the teachers, they contribute their lessons from online, which we found that it's like kind of very, very much cost effective. But at the same time, class participations with the teacher assistants, right? So for example, like a professor, not professor, the lecturer or teachers give online classes, but the teaching assistants stay with the students and then facilitate the students all in the class, so that they can get like both in class encompass how to say the work, as well as with the online benefit like that. So we started that one with very like zero financial things, and we started the volunteer that one, and it has been running like now in year 2s. I believe it's going to promote that one. That is how I would like to share the experience. And then my question is whether you have assets about those who, after the COVID, after the pandemic, for those started the online universities like that, online, who want to have like online university or colleges, how many of them, in getting more established, something like that. So I would like to answer that thing. And my contribution is a kind of, I think in the future is like our university still where, go with the hybrid, but a little bit in advance in technology, like 3D video online classes, like teachers is appear in front of the class, like with the, like not with the Zoom, with the 3D version, right? So something like that. So in the futures, I see it like that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So very great question. Thank you so much for your comment, Min. Yes, in regards to the number of online programs of higher education, yes, that is significantly growing in the post-pandemic era. And not just fully online colleges and university, but also institutions of higher education have begun to create new academic programs within their own institutions to offer fully online courses from a distance. Sometimes when they do that, they contract out with a third service provider to offer these fully online courses within the institution. The other time, the faculty members who work at that particular institution will teach the class fully online. So it's sort of like a double sword, where the institution can actually profit from the institution and get not just fully online within their own institution, but contract out to a third service provider and have them actually run their online programs. So an example, it's called rights education. I put that in the chat. It's where institutions of higher education partner with rights education, and they facilitate all the degree programs that are conducted fully online And I think this is going to be a new trend. We call this somewhat of a hybrid campus, hybrid environment where institutions are trying to generate revenue, of course. It helps increase their enrollment, their prestige, their effectiveness and productivity. But I think this will continue to grow in the post-pandemic era, especially with the rise of AI. We know that AI is also going to help, exasperate and expedite more online courses and programs and services to the campus. And I think this is going to be the new normal. People are afraid to talk about it. People don't want to think about, thinking about offering online courses or fully online programs. But I think, as AI gets better, I do believe that it's going to double, by 2030 and 2040, that we would expect that all institutions of higher education will have at least one fully online program within their own institution. Otherwise, they're just not going to compete with all the other institutions around the world because of, global competitiveness, academic rankings and all the other factors. So with that said, yes, I think it's going to continue to grow, and it's something that we need to be aware of and be cognizant of. So.
Thank you. And we have 4 minutes left. I have a question from Bill, who is asking about the approach in salary reduction, to what extent it can be used across the board in relation to professors and administrative leaders. Should they be also part of that policy, I suppose? So, and then Yuan Tom asking, you mentioned a lot about the challenges the workers would face, but it looks like these challenges you can see can exist in any remote work. So I want to ask, what is the distinction between hybrid and remote work in higher education compared to that in other sectors? I mean, just we talk about higher education, right? But is it comparable to remote work in other sectors? So if you can address one of those questions or two of them at the same time. So,
yeah, I'll answer those two questions very quickly. So for Yuan, I do believe that hybrid and remote work in higher education will be very similar to other sectors and occupations, regardless of what industry you're in. So if you're in the for-profit sector, whether you're working for like a bank or you're working for, an engineering firm, and they're offering fully remote or hybrid work, I do believe it's going to be very similar in terms of job duties, responsibilities, in higher education. And I don't see much of a distinction between industries and sectors. But, there could be, minor characteristics or distinctive characteristics, but I don't see drastic differences between the two workforce. With Bill's question, the discussion of salary has been a very contested issue, particularly in the US. Should employees, particularly faculty members, be offered a lower salary than if they're working fully remote compared to those who are working fully in person? I don't think that has yet been very institutionalized or been very well adopted across institutions. I think once remote and hybrid work becomes the new normal, which is starting to become the new normal, I think the salary will be just as equivalent to in-person faculty positions. And same with staff positions. If you're working for a vice president for enrollment, if we're comparing between remote and fully in person, I do believe the salary would be just as the same, regardless of whether you are fully in person or if you're fully remote. But of course that will take time, as we continue to offer these options for employees. I think it's important for new research to be conducted and new studies to understand the trends, issues, and perspectives of hybrid and remote work in higher education.
Thank you very much, Roy. It's been a really great conversation, and I'm sorry if we were not able to facilitate all the questions. Roy has kindly suggested that you write to him and continue this discussion in person with your questions. But I would again just encourage everyone to buy this book, which is available through Palgrave Macmillan, and it contains a great number of interesting case studies and recommendations from different countries, different contexts. I believe you will find something really interesting here in this book. So I look forward to reading this book in full myself. I just received it recently, but when I browsed, I felt like it's a must to read book. So thank you again, Roy, and we hope to see you in Hong Kong someday. And many thanks for your contributions to the field and to the community. So all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot for attending. Have a wonderful day.